Okay, I've moved along through a fair amount of the drawing where I started making a little more of a three-dimensional volume to some of the forms, and this apple has a good start to it. I just want to show you a little bit more. There's a reflection that's up in here, and you have a couple of different things that you can work with. Sometimes a smaller eraser, and I would work that in a kind of a circular motion and let that circle kind of grow outward, and that way you get the reflection. It looks pretty normal, and it kind of slowly blends out into the rest of the shadow or the form. And so that's one way to get that detail there. And you can also go with your larger white eraser, and this time maybe instead of working with the flat edge, work with one of the corners and slowly try to work that highlight or that reflection into that apple. Now there are some things that you can decide to do or maybe eliminate. There's some spots and textures on the apple. Sometimes that stuff can look a little bit sloppy if you try to put it in, and it's up to you whether you try to, but just realize that if you don't do it really well, it probably doesn't improve the drawing. Now there are other things that I'm going to move on to this apple. One of the things I showed was a French curve, and all it is take a piece of paper and do an S cut on it, and that can be used to help create a stronger edge on things such as the apple here. If I want this edge to be a little bit stronger and more precise, I will put that down and I will erase right next to it, and it gives me a much stronger edge so that I can see where the apple stops and where the background begins. Now this works well when you need strong detail, and sometimes you want a softer edge. When you have kind of an atmospheric perspective, as things are farther back in space, they don't always have a sharp edge. So it isn't something that you're going to use all the time. So I'm going to kind of use it up on this apple because it is up in front and close. And so I'm going to give it a little bit stronger edge between the apple and the bottle. So you can compare the two areas here where you have a sharp edge and where it isn't sharp yet. As you get down toward the bottom area of the apple, it's not the apple I'm going to be erasing, I'll be erasing the background instead. So this time I'm going to use the rounded part of the French curve, and I will cover up the apple and erase the background. And again, soft scrubbing helps you get that to blend out gradual, that you don't create a real sharp spot that you can't blend out. But you can see how I get more of a sharp edge for the apple at that point. One of the things that you're going to find throughout this project is your ability to see what's really happening in your drawing. Take time to study these things. If you don't see it, you're not going to draw it. And if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. So take time to look for all the details and subtle shades that are existing. So I'll do a little more on this apple, and then I'll move on to another area. Okay, I'm going to continue working on the value and three-dimensional form of these objects as I move along here. Start doing some more work on the bowl here, and you can see if you look at the photo how bright it is up along this area, and then it gets darker going down and much darker as it goes toward the left. So as you start doing that, you have to kind of make sure that you accommodate or change the pressure on your eraser as you go along there. I need a light faint contrast there, so I'm not going to take out too much white, but I'm going to take out enough just to make sure that the background is different than the bowl. And this is one of these places that is a very soft shadow, so I don't really need that sharp edge on this side. Over here, I probably would want the sharp edge, so I would probably come back and use the template on that. And the template isn't always going to be the exact shape of the object that you're outlining, so sometimes you have to turn it and rotate a little bit as you move across that surface. So I'll line it up with the top part first, And that's fairly bright, so I'm going to erase pretty hard in that area. And again, I want that stronger contrast. As I get down toward the bottom, I'm going to move my French curve a little more, and maybe not push down quite so hard. And just to try to get that silhouette or the outline of that shape in place. On the rim, you can see I have kind of almost a trough-like three-dimensional quality to it. It's probably a little bit darker in the middle than it should be, so I will lighten that up in the middle, but at the same time, I want to make sure the two outside edges of that rim remain lighter than the middle. So if I take too much out in the middle, maybe I'm going to have to come back and do some more on the rim itself. And the smaller eraser obviously gives you not quite a pencil point, but something that's a little more accurate than the big eraser. I look at the stripes on the croquet ball that's in here. They also show the three-dimensional shading. They're stronger toward the top, and they get a little bit darker as they go down toward the bottom. So I want to make that ball look rounded if possible. There are very subtle grays of the texture of the ball, and those I will put in there. They're not going to be as strong as the white stripes, but I'm going to again put them in place to give you a little bit of the texture of the ball itself. Moving on to the labels, again, possible to use the straight side of the French curve. And I'm not going to go too detailed on the label. In fact, putting writing in sometimes can be more than what's necessary. So again, kind of weigh out the value of it. I think kind of leaving an impression of an image or letters is probably enough without really getting in there to try to write all the information that's there. So that kind of gives you a feeling on that. Down here you can see where I've erased into the bottle too much here. If that happens, sometimes you can come back in, add some charcoal in that place, and this time I'll use my 2B charcoal pencil to be a little more precise. I'll work that in, and that really doesn't harmonize with the surface when I just put that black and leave it there. So I take a Q-tip or a blending stump and I'll blend that out so it has a little more of a harmonious blend with what I originally started out with. So it's there without being, I guess, maybe obnoxious where what's wrong with, why is that big black spot there? So it kind of blends it out a little bit nicer. So I will add some more details to it as I go through here, and I'll show you kind of the final project. There's things like the apple stem right here versus trying to go around it like I did here. I'm going to come back in and add this apple stem in after the fact. And again, I will blend that out with the Q-tip so it's not just there as a black shade, but it kind of becomes a little more of a subtle or harmonious look with the rest of the shading. So I will finish this up and come back and show you the final project, and we'll discuss things such as shadows, texture, do you show the texture of the wood or not? And so it's worth trying, and if you don't like it, it's pretty easy to solve by covering it back up. Okay, I'm at the point of nearly finishing up on the project, and there are a couple of things two other things I might want to use. Just a regular pencil eraser, the orange erasers, they actually have kind of a sandpaper-like texture to them, and they will erase things if you need to get a brighter, whiter area. And you have to be careful with this paper. You could wear a hole through it, so that's one of the advantages of the Rives BFK. It'll handle a lot of aggressive erasing. But with this, you can come back in and get things that you might want to be much brighter white. And the fact that it is a smaller eraser, it lends itself to trying to get those details in better. And then the other thing is once in a while you have areas that you really need to have blacker. And what I will use is a number 2B charcoal pencil. Places like maybe the actual space between the object and the table that it's sitting on. We talked about that in other drawings where that's the only place you might see a true line. And so I may draw that in. But again, I'll come back with a Q-tip or blending stump and soften that up a little bit. But it gives you that chance or that opportunity to put in a stronger contrast there. Other things I mentioned earlier is maybe the impression of the labels and maybe some detail of possible letters without really getting into writing names and stuff like that. You know, there's a couple of letters or whatever on this part of the label. I might just put in some lines to kind of indicate that it could be a word or something of that sort without getting into a lot of detail. You can see the stripes on the croquet ball show that it is a rounded ball, the highlights of the textures. And so those are all things that I would look for in a finished work, how well you capture that three-dimensional quality. But overall, it's basically a completed drawing. So if you look at the photo, compare the photo to the drawing, for the most part, the three-dimensional shading is the way you want it to be, and obviously the method of using a reductive drawing process, things are a little bit softer and you really don't have the line quality that you would with pencil, whether it be a China marker or graphite pencil or a charcoal pencil. You have these very subtle values.